Hello, listeners. This is Kat, and welcome back to Put Your Hands Up Podfics. This will be the continuation of Always Chasing After Something. This will be Part 17, Chapter 10. There were so many emergencies, Shota didn't know where to go first. Students were scattered throughout the forest. Mandalay and Tiger were fighting. He hadn't heard about Pixie Bob or Ragdoll, and now Kirishima and Izuku had absconded to go find Koda. Which, fine. Koda's safety needed to be ensured, he agreed, and he couldn't be everywhere, so having someone else escort the kid to the lodge was a good thing. And, of all the people at the lodge, Izuku was one of his top two choices to send alone. His first choice would have been Vlad, but someone needed to hold down the fort and protect the remaining students. Izuku was used to combat and could hold his own, and if anyone was going to be caught fighting with their quirk, he'd rather it be Izuku. A vigilante breaking the law was more acceptable than a hero student, or at least the consequences wouldn't screw up his future career the way it would for the students. Footsteps caught his attention, and he adjusted course to meet whoever it was, friend or foe. Izuku and Kirishima all but crashed into him, easing some of his concerns. They had Koda, who was not unharmed, but the two of them were. Izuku was speckled with blood, though. It didn't look like his, and when Kirishima said Izuku took care of the villain, he had to wonder what that meant. Now, however, wasn't the time. Priorities. Kids were safe. One villain was neutralized. He sent them back to the lodge and sprinted through the forest to find Mandalay and get her to pass on the announcements to everyone else. She and Tiger struggled against two villains, neither one able to get the upper hand. Shota's quirk wasn't much help, but he threw out his capture scarf to restrain the larger one, allowing Tiger to knock her out. Then the three of them were able to gang up on the mutant one, and he was knocked out soon after. Mandalay passed on his messages, and he raced off into the forest again to start tracking students down. The woods were eerily silent. Animals had fled from the fire, leaving only harsh breathing and pounding footsteps for noise. He didn't even see the person who tackled him. They pinned his arms to his sides and covered his mouth, pulling him back behind a tree. Shota struggled, jabbing an elbow back into ribs and tossing his head into their chin. His assailant held him tighter, pressing more firmly across his mouth. Something else crashed through the woods beside them, narrowly missing their hiding spot. Shota froze. What the hell had that been? "Sorry, Sensei," Shoji whispered. Shota immediately relaxed at his voice, and Shoji uncovered his mouth and released his hold. "Dark Shadow is out of control. He's attacking anything that moves. Can you erase his quirk?" That eldritch horror was his student? He had no idea that Tokiyami was holding back so much. Did the dark really strengthen his quirk that much? Something to think about later, after this crisis was over. Shota nodded and crept forward until the massive shadow was in his line of sight again, and activated his quirk. With a shriek, Dark Shadow dissipated. Tokiyami stumbled on his feet, dropping to his knees. Shoji rushed past Shota to check on him. "Tokiyami!" "I'm all right," Tokiyami panted. He looked over his shoulder. "Thank you, Sensei." "Of course. What happened?" Shoji held up a bloody stump on one of his extra arms. Even knowing this particular student could regrow his limbs, Shota's stomach curdled at the sight. "A villain got the drop on us, and Dark Shadow went berserk." "The darkness makes him stronger," Tokiyami said. "I apologize for losing control. This is a stressful situation, one you were unprepared for," Shota said, suddenly glad that this kid wanted to be a hero. He'd make a horrifying villain. But you know what you'll need to work on now." Tokiyami nodded. "Can you get back to the lodge on your own?" Shota asked. "Or do you think Dark Shadow will take over again?" "I can hold him for that long," Tokiyami said. "Then go." Shoji helped Tokiyami climb to his feet. They went one way on the path, back towards the pussycats and the lodge. Shota went the other. 2 more students accounted for. Not enough. Not yet. He needed to find all the others, especially Bakugo. He found a glacier instead. Well, where there was ice, there had to be a Todoroki somewhere nearby. He risked calling out for the kid while he searched, jumping into the underbrush on the side of the path to go around the glacier. "Todoroki!" Let a villain jump out at him right now. He dared them. Chips of ice littered the path, broken off from the big glacier. Smaller ice formations made a trail into the woods, some of which, Shota was horrified to notice, were smeared with blood. A tiny part of him wished he had the same gray morality as Izuku. These villains were hurting his students, and taking care of them sounded very appealing. Break some limbs, beat them into a coma. The possibilities were endless when one didn't care about excessive use of force punishments. "Todoroki!" Shota called again. He heard ice crackling up ahead, and deep, guttural moaning. "Sensei!" Todoroki responded, voice faint and out of breath. Shota leaped over a fallen tree and rounded a large oak. There, more ice, and a flickering glow that could only be fire. "Flesh! I want flesh!" a villain moaned. Long spears shot through the trees, cutting off Shota's path. They pierced through Todoroki's ice, and chunks tumbled into the bushes. Running sideways, Shota finally caught a glimpse of Todoroki crouched behind the same formation, an unconscious student from 1B on his back. Patches of ice dotted Todoroki's right side, and each heavy pant was foggy. Cuts on his face, arms and legs dripped blood, and a nasty gash on his left arm probably explained the blood on the ice before. The 1B student looked unharmed, beyond being unconscious and a dead weight Todoroki had to carry around. The relief in Todoroki's expression when they made eye contact made Shota want to cry and commit atrocities at the same time. He'd barely seen anything more than apathy and frustration on this kid's face all term. To see that much trust from one of his hardest students aimed at him made his chest glow with pride. "Warm yourself up. I'll take care of this," Shota said. He stepped around the ice to face the villain, vaguely recognizing him from the news about a prison break a few weeks back. Moonfish, if he remembered correctly. His quirk turned his teeth into deadly spears, and the man had killed and eaten multiple people before the heroes caught up with him. His arms were still restrained in his prison uniform, so once Shota erased Moonfish's quirk, the man was hardly a fight. A solid punch, or 3, but who was keeping track? And Moonfish was down for the count. He hurried back to Todoroki. The icy patches on him had melted, and his breath no longer looked like a fog machine. Most of the cuts weren't an immediate concern, only the one on his left arm. He hated to waste time administering first aid right now, but it was better to take 2 minutes to wrap the wound than risk Todoroki passing out from blood loss later. "Bakugo's missing," Todoroki said. He laid the student down next to him and held out his bleeding arm when he saw Shota pull a roll of gauze out. "Define missing," Shota said, because in his mind, half of the students were still missing. He wound the gauze around the cut, over Todoroki's shirt for now. They'd treat it properly later, back at the lodge. "We were both fighting Moonfish, and then he was just gone. He wouldn't leave in the middle of a fight." No, that definitely didn't sound like the hothead. Combat days were Bakugo's favorite in class. He lived for the thrill of the fight. Running away in the middle of one? Not freaking likely. "Did you see anything?" Shota asked. Todoroki shook his head. "I was staying back to defend him, while Bakugo attacked. His explosion stopped suddenly and he was just gone." Grabbed in the middle of a fight, without alerting Todoroki, who'd been right there. How had the League pulled that one off? However they did it, his priority was clear. He needed to find the villains before they left. Now that they had their target, there was no reason to think they'd stick around any longer than necessary. If they were heroes, he'd assume they'd wait for all their comrades. Villains rarely shared that sense of loyalty. For all he knew, every villain attacking tonight was expendable to the League, like at the USJ. He tied off the bandage and debated what to do with the students now. He wasn't comfortable with the idea of an injured Todoroki carting an unconscious student back to camp. Neither was he comfortable with Todoroki and an unconscious student following him to fight more villains. He hated crises like this, where there were no good options. "What's wrong with him?" Shota asked, jerking his chin toward the other student. "There was poisonous gas," Todoroki said. "Bakugo and I managed to stay just ahead of it for the most part." There'd been what? How had he and the other pros not known about that? No wonder so many students were still unaccounted for. How many were just there lying unconscious all over the forest? Priorities. He couldn't do anything for those students right now. Bakugo needed his help much more urgently. "I'm going to look for Bakugo. I want you to take him and get back to camp." Todoroki scowled. "If you're looking for Bakugo, I'm afraid he's coming with me," a voice called above them. Shota grabbed for his scarf, pivoting to keep Todoroki behind him. His quirk activated, and he scanned the trees until finding the villain hovering over the branches. Even with erasure on him, the villain continued to defy gravity, so however he was up there, it wasn't quirk-related. How obnoxious. "Where is my student?" Shota demanded. The villain flashed a marble between his fingers. "He's perfectly safe and unharmed. Don't worry. We'll take good care of him from now on." Todoroki shifted behind him, putting a hand on Shota's shoulder and guiding him to the left, making room for one of his glaciers, Shota realized, taking another step sideways to give him more space. The temperature dropped considerably as ice sprang forth next to him. "That's my cue," the villain said. "Exit, stage right." Shota could just see him over the ice wall, neatly stepping out on branches and all but flying over the trees. If that wasn't his quirk, how was he so nimble? Those branches at the top shouldn't have held his weight. Support items, maybe. "Sensei," Todoroki called. "Get back to camp," Shota ordered, slipping between the ice formations to chase after the villain. He used his capture weapon to get up above the trees, flinging himself through the air after him. Each time he descended and threw out another loop, his heart seized with panic. Trees weren't the best anchors, especially this high up. Branches broke easily, and if he grabbed the wrong one, and it couldn't take his weight, he was in for a nasty fall. Not that he'd feel any pain with the adrenaline rushing through him right now. This villain had his student. That was unacceptable. "I really wasn't in the mood for an encore," the villain said ahead of him. He twisted back, still hopping nimbly from tree to tree, and hurled a marble at him. The marble grew into a large chunk of Todoroki's ice. It crashed into Shota's shoulder, and he lost the momentum from his swing. Gravity pulled him down, leaving his stomach somewhere in the sky. Scrambling for his capture weapon, he hurled another loop ahead of him, praying for it to latch onto something. The scarf went taut. He yanked, straining to turn his fall into another swing. Branches creaked ominously, holding just long enough to launch him forward. He didn't get the height he wanted, and he dropped to the ground to pursue on foot. Ahead of him, light between the trees indicated a clearing. That had to be where the villains would regroup. He ran faster, wishing he had the chance to take his time and properly assess what he was about to jump into. But time was not on his side. They'd spirit Bakugo away in a warp gate if he didn't act fast enough. "Did you get the kid?" the flame villain from the lodge asked. Was this the real one, or another clone? "Of course," the marble villain replied. Shota leapt over a bush and threw out his scarf, wrapping the marble villain up from behind. "Whoa, I know this guy. Who's this?" a villain in a black and white bodysuit said. Shota hadn't seen him yet this evening. How many damn villains were in this forest? "Out of the way, Compress," the flame villain warned. His hand burst into blue fire. "Right." Compress, the villain Shota had tied up, disappeared into one of his own marbles. Shota leapt back to avoid the fire shot at him, activating Erasure to nullify the flames. The villain drew his hand back with a snarl. "I'm here!" a teenage girl announced, running into the clearing and waving a knife. She had a weird contraption on her back, and some kind of metal muzzle hanging around her neck. She looked way too young to be partnered with an official villain group like this. Compress jumped back up, disgruntled. "Really, Eraserhead, we've captured the boy fair and square." "Give me back my student," Shota demanded.
"Ugh, who's the old dude?"
the girl asked.
"A friend. An enemy."
Shota spared the contradictory villain a glance. Was this some kind of gimmick, or was the man unwell? No time to figure it out.
"You're not a half-bad hero, Eraserhead," the flame villain said. "I'd hate to kill you, so would you buzz off?"
"Not without my student," Shota declared. He wrapped Compress in his scarf again and pulled the villain off balance, only for Compress to disappear into a marble again. Fine. If his scarf wouldn't work, Shota would do this the old-fashioned way. He lunged forward and scooped the marble out of the dirt.
"Compress!"
the other villains yelled. Before Shota could figure out his next move or even celebrate the small victory, Compress undid his quirk. The marble in Shota's hand turned into a full-grown man. Shota wasted no time in punching him in the face. The mask went flying, as did a marble kept in the man's mouth. Bakugo, that marble, so carefully hidden and protected, had to be his student. The other marbles Compress had waved around were decoys meant to throw Shota off the scent. Shota lunged for the marble. Reaching it milliseconds before Compress could get it, the villain's hand closed over Shota's. But the marble was in Shota's hand, and Shota would never let go. "We'll just take you with us, too," Compress said. And then the world stopped. All right, listeners, this concludes the first half to Chapter 10 of Always Chasing After Something. The second half to this chapter will be up next. I'm really excited about this one. I think the author does an amazing job with how they've relayed out this training camp arc, right? All these instances where in the initial canon material, Izuku is the one who is in place of where Shota is, right? Running across Moonfish, right? Running across Shoji and Tokiyami, right? All those instances is Shota instead, and right? And how him being there in those moments had reduced some of the issues that took place at the time, right? Some things were laid out differently for sure, right? Like rather than Bakugo and Todoroki still being together fighting Moonfish when Shota shows up, instead Shota shows up and Todoroki is there alone, right? Or with the 1B student who was down. But I really like how the author's putting this together. I think it's a really unique take on it that's creating this opportunity for Shota to be taken with them, right? Shota being a pro hero would maybe make it further, right, than a student who's untrained would, like Izuku, in getting to that point, right? And so he's actually able to stop their quirks, making more progress and actually getting that marble from Compress, leading to them having to take him with them. So a lot of changes, really great detail, visualization while you're reading and you're listening to it. I think the author does a great job. The second half to this one is going to pick up with Izuku's point of view, so we'll get that experience next time. And I'd love to hear the thoughts and reactions you're having to everything so far, so drop those in the comments below for me. And as always, thank you all so much for listening.